be.
Welcome back to The Quiet Fire. I'm Jayne, and wherever you are listening from today, whether you are driving to work, hiding in the bathroom for 5 minutes of peace, folding laundry with one eye twitching, or lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering why your body suddenly thinks it is both a furnace and a crime scene investigator, I'm glad you're here. Today's episode is called Rage, Grief, and Emotional Awakening During Menopause. Now, let's just begin honestly. Nobody warned us about the rage. Nobody sat us down at school and said, one day, Susan from accounts chewing crisps too loudly may genuinely test your commitment to basic human decency. Nobody explained that menopause could feel less like a few hot flushes and more like your entire nervous system staging a dramatic protest outside Parliament with flaming banners and a megaphone. And beneath the humor, because honestly, sometimes if we don't laugh, we'll scream into a decorative cushion, there is something very real happening. Many women enter this stage frightened by the intensity of their emotions. The anger, the sadness, the sensitivity, the sudden clarity, the exhaustion of carrying everybody else for decades. And perhaps most unexpectedly of all, the grief. Not simply grief for youth. That's far too simplistic. This can be grief for time lost, needs unmet, boundaries never spoken, versions of ourselves abandoned in order to survive, nurture, perform, achieve, keep the peace, stay desirable, stay agreeable, stay good. Menopause has a strange way of placing truth directly on the table and refusing to let us walk around it anymore. And scientifically, there are reasons why this emotional landscape can feel so intense. As we discussed in the previous episode, hormones such as estrogen and progesterone do far more than regulate reproduction. Estrogen interacts closely with serotonin and dopamine, neurotransmitters deeply involved in emotional regulation, mood stability, motivation, and pleasure. Progesterone has calming, anti-anxiety effects on the nervous system. So, as these hormones fluctuate and decline, the brain itself becomes more reactive to stress. Research shows that during perimenopause, the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, can become more sensitive, while sleep disruption and elevated cortisol place additional strain on emotional resilience. Which means the nervous system has less buffering capacity. Translation: things that once washed over you suddenly feel personal. The slow Wi-Fi feels personal. The passive-aggressive email feels personal. Your bra existing feels personal. And there is a particular kind of menopausal rage that is almost impressive in its efficiency. It is not the dramatic tantrum rage of adolescence. No. This is quieter, sharper, ancient. It is the rage of a woman who has spent 30 years organizing everybody else's lives only to discover nobody knows where the dishwasher tablets are. Again. It is the rage of emotional labor becoming visible. And what fascinates me is how many women describe menopause not as becoming irrational, but becoming unable to tolerate what they previously endured silently. That is very different. Author Brené Brown once said, "Unused creativity is not benign. It metastasizes." And I often think the same can be said of unspoken truth. What happens to decades of swallowed anger, of self-abandonment, of shrinking ourselves to keep relationships comfortable? At some point, the body says, we cannot store this anymore. And so, it rises, not to destroy us, but to reveal us. Now let's talk about grief, because this part matters deeply. There can be grief in watching the body change. Grief in recognizing your energy is finite. Grief in children growing older. Grief in aging parents. Grief in relationships that no longer fit. Grief in realizing how quickly life moves. Menopause often arrives during what psychologists call a sandwich generation period, women caring simultaneously for children, aging parents, partners, careers, finances, households, communities, while also navigating their own profound biological transition. Frankly, it is extraordinary any of us remember our passwords. And grief during menopause is not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrives quietly. You hear a song from 20 years ago and suddenly cry in the supermarket near frozen peas. You look at old photographs and mourn the woman who tried so hard to be enough for everyone. You realize you spent decades apologizing for taking up space. There is mourning in that. But there is awakening too. And this is where the conversation becomes powerful. Because alongside the emotional turbulence, Many women report something remarkable emerging during menopause. Clarity. A stripping away. Almost as though the hormonal transition peels back layers of conditioning. Women begin asking, what do I actually want? Who am I when I stop performing? Why am I tolerating this? What parts of me have gone quiet? And sometimes the answers are uncomfortable. Sometimes marriages change. Friendships shift. Careers no longer align. The woman who once said yes to everything suddenly says no. And everybody around her acts shocked. Honestly, some women don't need hormone replacement therapy half as much as they need people to stop expecting them to carry the emotional welfare of the entire planet. Now, before somebody writes me an angry email, yes, hormones matter enormously, and support matters enormously too. Lifestyle changes can genuinely help. Sleep support, movement, protein intake, strength training, stress reduction, therapy, hormone replacement therapy where appropriate, reducing alcohol, community support. These things are not trivial. The brain and body are deeply interconnected. Chronic stress raises cortisol, and high cortisol worsens anxiety, sleep disturbance, weight gain, inflammation, and emotional volatility, which means women are not failing to cope. Often, they are biologically overloaded. And can we also acknowledge something else? Many women entering menopause today belong to generations raised to prioritize productivity over rest. To keep going, push through, smile politely, carry on. Meanwhile, the body is whispering, I need something different now. And if the whisper is ignored long enough, eventually the body stops whispering. It starts roaring. There is a quote from Glennon Doyle that I love. The truest, most beautiful life never promises to be an easy one. And menopause, I think, asks women for truth more than ease. Truth about exhaustion. Truth about resentment. Truth about desire. Truth about identity. Truth about what hurts. Truth about what matters. And strangely, that truth can become liberating. Because many women emerge from this phase more themselves than they have ever been. Not softer necessarily. Not smaller. Not quieter. But more real. More boundaried. More discerning. More unwilling to betray themselves for approval. There is wisdom in that fire. And perhaps this is why so many ancient cultures viewed older women differently than modern society often does. Not as less than, but as oracles. Midwives of wisdom. Women who could finally see clearly because they were no longer consumed by the demands of pleasing everyone else. Now, before we finish today, I want to speak directly to the woman listening who feels emotionally overwhelmed right now. The woman crying in her car before work. The woman lying awake replaying conversations from 2007. The woman fantasizing about running away to a cottage where nobody asks her what's for dinner ever again. Firstly, deeply relatable. Secondly, please know this. Your emotions are not random. Your body is communicating. Sometimes through tears. Sometimes through fatigue. Sometimes through anger. Sometimes through grief. And none of that makes you broken. You are navigating a profound neuroendocrine transition while still attempting to function in a world that rarely pauses long enough to honor what women carry. So, if you need rest, rest. If you need support, seek it. If you need boundaries, build them. And if you need to sit in your car eating chocolate in absolute silence before going back into the house, that too may currently qualify as nervous system regulation. Thank you for joining me today on The Quiet Fire. Next time, we are going to explore intimacy, sexuality, body image, and relationships during menopause, the conversations many couples avoid but desperately need to have. Until then, be gentle with yourself. Even fire changes shape before it becomes light.
The quiet fire.